Assalamu alaikum and good evening, everyone. My name is Alaa Zarafi, and I am the president of the National Young Professional Committee under the auspices of the Ministry of Energy and Minerals. It gives me a great pleasure to welcome you all and to extend a warm welcome on behalf of the NYP committee and for another episode of our virtual talk. Today, we are discussing a really interesting topic with a really interesting guest, a topic that have been trending regionally and globally, and a lot of countries are in a race in acquiring the latest technologies and acquiring the latest market share of this interesting part of the renewable energy. So without further ado, let me first introduce our guest, Dr. Khalil Al-Hanashi. Dr. Khalil holds a PhD, a PhD degree in the Sustainable Energy and Technology from the Energy Technology Research Institute in the University of Nottingham from UK. He is currently working part of the Oman Hydrogen Economy Feasibility Study team. He comes from the oil and gas technology management background. He joined PDO in 2005, assumed the role of control and automation engineer, supporting both oil and gas operation in PDO. He later moved to become production and measurement specialist, then took the role of corporate technology advisor in corporate planning directorate of PDO. He graduated from the University of Newcastle in UK with a master's degree in applied process control in 2005. He holds a bachelor with honor degree in the system and control engineering from the University of Sheffield United. Dr. Khalil, first of all, thank you for accepting our invitation to shed some lights on this really important topic that we want to discuss many aspects of it and shed some lights, as I said, to the NYP committee here in Oman.
Shukran Ala. Thank you for having me, and it's an honor for me to speak to the young professionals, and I'm very pleased to see that the national momentum in young professional organization is becoming a national movement. I know it started within, for example, a PDO sort of community, but I think it's very pleasing to see this becoming a national movement where the young professionals from all disciplines connect and learn from each other. It's my pleasure to be here with you today.
Thank you, Doctor. And we are really counting on the support of people like you that they are much experienced in the field to guide us through, these challenging times and so on. So guys, for your knowledge, IJAD is a membership-based virtual collaborative platform where industry, academia, and government can interact and engage in the energy-related research and innovative activities. I recommend you all to go to visit their website. It is a great project. Initiated by or supervised by the Ministry of Energy and Minerals and the Research Council and PDO. So, Doctor, without further ado, what we can say about the green hydrogen, or what is the green hydrogen that has been trending, and gaining momentum each day, and it's a hot topic, have been discussed in many conferences and many gatherings and so on. So, can you tell us briefly what is the green hydrogen, or what is the hydrogen related to the renewables and so on?
Yes, I think to start with, hydrogen is as an element existed for or discovered, let's say, more than 400 years ago, and it's been used in the industry. It is nothing new for people who work on refineries, for example, people who work in ammonia plants and fertilizers. They know hydrogen. We have been using hydrogen for years and years. The hydrogen that we are sort of used to is my screens are up now because maybe we can have some visuals.
Please.
Yeah. So the hydrogen as an element, it's the smallest and the lightest and the most abundant element in the universe. So that is the most available element in the universe. It's interesting. It's very active element. So you don't find hydrogen alone. You always find it bonding or bonded with other elements. For example, water is H2O, that's hydrogen and oxygen. You have methane, that is, or hydrocarbons, always hydrogen and carbon. CH4 is methane, and so on, because it's very active element. However, it's an element that has a lot of energy as well. So the interest in hydrogen, as I said, it's used in the industry. It's used in the refineries, for example, to remove sulfur from crude. It's used in the ammonia plants. However, the hydrogen that we're used to as an industrialist is the hydrogen that comes from natural gas. So that is the hydrogen that we're used to. And now, with the recent development in energies and energy scenarios in the world, the view graph that you see is depicting, for example, an expectation or prediction or insight from the latest IEA report. IEA issued a report, International Energy Agency, is a respected think tank that looks at the global energy scenarios. And they've issued a recent report talking about what they call path to net zero, where there's so much interest now in the world to decarbonize or to remove the carbon from the energy sector. And we all know the famous Paris Agreement, Paris Climate Agreement, that a lot of
Yeah.
countries actually signed up to. The essence of that is, can we grow and continue to consume energy as the world population grows, as the nation develop? Every nation would need more energy, more people, more activities, more energy. But the idea is we should not emit more CO2. Yes, we need more energy, but we don't need more CO2, because we all know the
Global
established link
warming.
between the
Exactly.
CO2 amount in the atmosphere and the global warming. So the IEA, for example, expects that we would continue to consume oil. That's the red line in your graph.
Mhm.
Oil will not go away. We will see a decline in coal, and we have already seen the decline in coal. Renewables will be the fast growing. You can see the green line is the renewables. So there will be more and more renewables in the primary energy supply in the world. Now, this is driven by the fact that renewables are becoming cheap. They are already in the business. The price of renewables has dropped significantly, to the extent that if you want to generate electricity now in our region, for example, it's cheaper to start to build a new renewable plant
Yes.
compared to a natural gas fired plant, for example. Nuclear will still be there because some countries still believe it is a viable option, but it will not grow as much. Traditional biomass is declining slightly. So this tells us, or the prediction is, as we consume more energy, there will be a drop in CO2 emission, and that is what the global world leaders kind of drive to, or that is what a lot of nations today are pushing, led by the Europeans, that
Mhm.
there are a lot of net zero ambitions. You hear in the news, net zero by 2050. So
Yes.
these are ambitious targets that a lot of nations started to set for themselves, that they will not, I mean, they will have a net zero emission, whether they don't emit or CO2 or they offset the CO2, remove it or compensate for it. So this is what brought hydrogen into the picture.
Yeah. So mainly it is a focus because it is a cleaner alternative, zero emission, as you said, for CO2. Uh, and
Yes,
we are aligning with the other Paris Agreement and other
yes.
countries' initiative to go for cleaner. So, Doctor, how about the efficiency of this one? Because as a field, you said it is like have been there for almost like 10 or 20 years, right? But why now like the talk is increasing more? Is it because of efficiency? Is it because of the technology that have been developed that make the hydrogen is a more, let's say, more efficient, more cheaper source for energy, or what?
Now, the reason, I think there are two main reasons
Hmm.
for increasing discussion about hydrogen in the recent year. One is, of course, as a clean energy. Just to reiterate, when you combust hydrogen, for those who are not from the energy sector, when you combust hydrogen, you get an energy, and you only emit water vapor, H2O.
Yeah.
Compared to the fossil fuel, the gas, the oil, when you combust them, you get CO2 emissions. So this is the main attractiveness of hydrogen. The other
Hmm.
attractiveness of hydrogen, and why people are talking about it now, the hydrogen storage technology is developing so fast that allow hydrogen from renewables to be stored. So the idea in a simple term is the technology for electrolyzers. Electrolyzers are the machines or the devices that are used to split water into hydrogen
Mhm.
and oxygen
Okay.
using
So
renewable electricity. So the idea
yeah.
is you have too much, you have you can produce electricity at competitive price from renewable
Mhm.
energy, solar or hydrogen. Uh, Using that electricity, you have to use it when it is generated. If you
Mhm.
want to store it, and the hydrogen is an attractive storage media, for example, where you can convert that electricity into hydrogen by using electrolyzers, which is just splitting water into its primary component, hydrogen, oxygen, using electricity. Then that hydrogen is a power, and you can store vast amount of it. You can ship it to another country. That is the other attractiveness of it. Why it's becoming now attractive, because countries like Japan, who want to remove CO2 from their industry, they don't have the land, they don't have the natural resources, the sun and the wind, to produce enough renewables. So
Mhm.
they have been importing energy. Japan imports a lot of LNG, a lot of crude. They are already thinking about importing clean energy. Or in
Okay.
another word, countries like Oman could export the wind and sun in the form of hydrogen. So
So
that is the
yeah.
other attractiveness, where technology has developed recently, allow cheap production of electricity, also allowed ways to store and transport
Yeah.
hydrogen in different forms.
Great. So, since you mentioned about the countries like Japan, so like in other commercial commodities, Doctor, we need to first identify a potential market for the green hydrogen, right? So, what are the potential hydrogen or local market, like, sorry, potential market, so either locally, regionally, or globally that we are targeting as a country?
Yes. Well, on the local front, I think one area that would benefit in Oman, for example, if we are to decarbonize or reduce our carbon footprint in the
Mhm.
country, is what is known in the energy industry as hard to decarbonize sectors. Now, people would say you produce electricity from renewables and then you use the electricity. Why do you have to go into this step of producing hydrogen, transporting hydrogen? There are certain industries, and I would say industries like cement, industries
Mhm.
like aluminium and steel, they rely on heat. So you cannot replace them with, you cannot electrify them. You can electrify your cars, you can electrify your home. Mainly our homes in Oman are electrified anyway. There is a small amount of LPG gas we use for cooking, but that even we can electrify. But when you come to these industries that are hard to decarbonize because they need high amount of heat, so aluminium smelters and ions and steel industries, they're looking at 1000 plus degrees C in their furnaces. You cannot get that from a direct electricity. You still need to burn a gas in a gas burners or a gas furnaces. And the only clean source, or the most viable clean source of gas, is hydrogen, where you replace the natural gas by hydrogen. So you could potentially see in Oman industrial areas becoming green. For example, Sahar industrial area,
Okay.
where there is a lot of export businesses. We could start greening those steel and aluminium industries. There's already buzzword of green aluminium, green steel.
Okay.
Basically, that is not green in color, but that is an aluminium and steel that was produced without emitting any CO2. And this market is growing. I mean, especially in Europe, where there is a lot of push from the public opinion and also from the climate point of view, that it's not enough that we drive electric car. If this electric car was made using technology that emitted CO2 in the first place, so
Mm.
this is what also driving the hype.
So saying that, Doctor, do you say that we are counting more in the exporting the hydrogen that we're going to produce or using it locally here?
I think there are opportunities in both sectors.
Both sectors.
There is a local opportunity. If we see more renewables coming up in Oman, hydrogen will lend itself as one of the options to store the renewables. You know, you will reach a point where you cannot have 100% solar and wind to run the country, because there is an intermittency issue with renewables. I mean, wind will not blow all day, sun will not shine at night. So hydrogen could be a an element or a technology that is used to make sure you can use renewable energy at night if you can combust it in the and reproduce energy from it. This is at local front, and at an export, of course, it could be a commodity that we export. We export oil, we export gas, or why not we export hydrogen and hydrogen derivative. And exporting hydrogen, we're already doing it, but not for energy. We export ammonia, and ammonia is a hydrogen and nitrogen. So that is already a business that we are doing. The only difference is the ammonia or the hydrogen we export today in form of ammonia comes
Mhm.
from natural gas. And maybe
Yeah,
for the sake of justification, I think we would
yeah,
probably
always.
shed some light on different types of hydrogen. I talked
Mhm.
about the hydrogen that we are used to is the gray hydrogen. So the gray
Exactly.
hydrogen is produced from SMR or steam methane reforming. So you just get natural gas or methane, react it with water to split that methane into hydrogen and carbon. So you have a hydrogen, the carbon will bond with the oxygen, so you get the CO2 emitted and you get hydrogen used. This is gray hydrogen, traditionally used in the industry, and I think Oman is the third or fourth gray hydrogen producer in the region in the GCC. We produce a lot of it, used in areas like Sohar refineries, Omifco fertilizer plant use a lot of hydrogen. The second
It's
type
great
of
news to
hydrogen
hear.
that is now being talked about recently is
Mhm.
hydrogen that does not emit CO2. So the trick, use a hydrogen and don't emit CO2. You can either do it in the blue route. The hydrogen business goes by color,
Mhm.
where you still use the methane, split it into hydrogen, and CO2 is emitted, but don't allow that CO2 to escape to the atmosphere. So you capture it and you store it. The third one, which is the green hydrogen that you've mentioned at the beginning of this discussion, is the hydrogen you produce using electrolyzers or from water or from non-fossil fuel, using renewable energy. In this case,
Mhm.
you don't emit any CO2 apart from the small amount that could be associated with making the renewable systems itself. And at the bottom, you can see the CO2 intensity is the big differentiator here. You can go from
Yeah.
8.5x to up to 0.8x if you are in green hydrogen. So this is
So
the
yeah,
hydrogen story. There are other developing colors. People talk about pink hydrogen now. That is
yeah.
hydrogen that is produced using electricity from nuclear plant. And
Mhm.
there is also a turquoise hydrogen that is again hydrogen from natural gas, but using a new way of reaction, which is a pyrolysis. But again, it will all boil down: do you use renewable energy, or do you emit CO2, or you don't emit CO2 when you produce your hydrogen?
So as a country, as Oman, Doctor, which path we are going to follow or focus mainly on the green or gray or the blue?
I think what's globally, or the global think tanks, or what makes more business sense, let's put it this way, we have a
Mhm.
lot of gray already in the business. We use it, we have experience with it. We could transit into blue if we want, if there is an opportunity to utilize the CO2, because when you do blue, you have to capture the CO2.
Mhm.
The beauty here is that you still keep you don't have to get rid of your gray. You're already invested into the infrastructure for gray hydrogen. If you want to decarbonize a certain sector, you just need to capture that CO2 and find a way where you store it, or you convert it into a form that doesn't escape to the atmosphere. The green hydrogen, I think, poses the biggest opportunity, because you eventually that is what will become most like the main or the streamlined one. It's a new investment, it's a new market, a new horizon. You could start new businesses. You could also grow the renewable base in Oman. We have huge renewable resources in the country. And that will take us maybe later into discussing why Oman comparing to other country. But I think blue could be an opportunity. Today there are already discussions, but green is the biggest opportunity. Let's put it this way.
Yes, exactly. Doctor, before going to why Oman, we want to what are the current ongoing projects related to the production of hydrogen, and we want to know more about it, because to be honest, there is not much news about it. We don't know much about in detail, like about the hydrogen industry here in Oman. So we would like you to tell us more about that, before moving why Oman, and what is our status on the global market, and what are the leading countries that we are looking for, like who is leading this race in the industry, in the hydrogen industry around the world. So Yeah, doctor.
Yeah, I think to answer your first question is what are the current
Current project.
activities, kind of
Yeah,
activities I would say in
yeah, that
Oman.
would
There
be
is, I
right
think,
term.
the one that I'm personally involved with, I would say, is the Oman Hydrogen Economy Feasibility Study that was launched or was launched by the MEM to look
Mm,
at hydrogen from an economy scale, not
mm,
only from a technology or industry, but if there is a hydrogen economy. That's what some countries already talk about, hydrogen economy. What would be the stake for Oman? Are we going to export hydrogen? Are we going to use hydrogen? What are the markets that are interested in Oman? So we had an interesting project that started in February 2020, I think, where
mhm,
we had a big workshop to gather people who have an interest in hydrogen under the direction of the of MEM at that time, where we it was an open discussion on different sort of working groups who want what we had international interest, we had local interest to kind of get the first impression. And from
mm,
that day, I think when we did this workshop, it was a big workshop. There was no hydrogen project announced in Oman. Now,
mm,
between February last year and today, there are a few hydrogen projects announced in Oman. And I think recently, if you're following the news, in the few weeks ago, OQ announced one of the largest potentially hydrogen projects in the world, with 25 gigawatt capacity of power,
mm.
to be in Oman. That is a project that is developed and led by OQ company. There is also other project that was announced and based on Duqm, where
Yes.
wind and solar will be used to produce hydrogen, aimed for export. There is a couple of other examples where there is a technology demonstrators, like the hydrogen technology is still in its beginning especially the green hydrogen, not the gray. It's a new technology, and you would need to demonstrate the scalability. So you start normally with a small gigawatt. So some companies like PDO, Arab Petroleum, they have project to have smaller pilots and demonstrator to
Mm.
learn the benefit and to adapt the hydrogen into their system. So I think there are between last year and this year, I think from no project into at least sizable 25 gigawatt plus project now in the design stage. We don't have any green hydrogen project on the ground. We have gray hydrogen already in the ground.
So we are counting basically on the local expertise here, or there is a collaboration with, overseas organization and some external investors or something, or it's purely a
Yes, I
local
think
project.
I think it's both. It's a combination. So all the project that has been announced, at least in the media, the Docom based project was between OQ and Demi, a Belgian based investment company and energy company.
Yeah.
Uh, Again, that is similar to the other project that OQ announced. It was a consortium, OQ plus some international investors from Asia and Kuwait. I think it's a combination. Oman is blessed by a lot of sun and wind, I would say, and that is one of the beauties. And you would need international experience when it comes to making the electrolyzers or the machines that will produce hydrogen. You would need the local experience when it comes to executing the project and putting things on the ground and delivering the projects. Investment can come from both ways as well. I think it's an interesting arena
Mm.
for international collaboration, I would say. The
Okay. Since
market also, the current market is a lot of it is also outside Oman.
Yeah. Since you mentioned the term arena, who are we are in the race with here in the region? Because I heard that Saudi Arabia are pushing as well, and Kuwait as well. They are pushing toward having more and more chunks of the market from this hydrogen industry. So, who is the leading country in this race here regionally or even globally?
I think originally, I don't think anybody is leading. We I think the whole world is in what is called as market activation stage.
Hmm?
So the market is being activated at different stages. There is no big momentum. There's a market activation. Interesting things. The hydrogen is still the green hydrogen, for example, is still more expensive than the gray hydrogen,
Hmm.
and there is a lot of efforts to drop that cost down because the world want a clean energy to decarbonize certain industries at least. As you mentioned, Saudi Arabia is having plans. UAE is having plans, but I think In Oman, we are by no means, I would say, behind when it comes to having a strategy in place,
Mm.
initiating the early project that we have heard about within the last year, and also the recent announcement of National Oman National Spatial Strategy that organizes the use of land. So there is already identification of renewable land where you can also harness more of the sun and wind. And the idea again, the more renewables you produce, you will get to a stage where you have excess renewables that is available for making chemicals, not for a direct consumption. I think we are
In the right path.
on par. I would say regionally on par. I would say other countries or technology developers are at different
Mhm.
stage. We look at countries like Germany, certainly that actually developing the technology to produce the hydrogen, and that is also an area where there is a lot of collaboration. In Oman, we have Oman Hydrogen Center that was launched about 2 years ago, based in
Mhm.
Geotech, and that is also based on a German collaboration. As I said, we have the feasibility study that we are conducting now has a huge international collaboration into it. There are the energy think tanks like the International Energy Agency involved. There are also the technology developers or the technology manufacturers, in addition to the local energy companies. Because at the end of the day, hydrogen is another energy form or energy carrier, it's called.
Career.
The players are the same traditional energy players, Shell, BP,
Mm.
Oman,
Mm.
PDO, OQ. They are very active, I would say, in this
Yeah.
market.
So, doctor, there is no concern that we need to go and start producing hydrogen and export it and to gain the market share, like the oil or gas in its early stages. So there's no concern that we need to start this early as possible. So nobody else going to take our market share, and later on we're going to have no market share, or, for example, and hydrogen volume that we don't have a market for.
I think it's the right time to start, and we have started. Maybe there are no export of hydrogen yet, and I think the whole world is experimenting with the export of hydrogen. There are no established. It's not like the LNG, where there is already LNG pricing and LNG markets. The whole world is experimenting with hydrogen at commercial stage, and I'm happy that we have few projects announced. That means we are already into the game. The commercial dealing and finding a long supply of hydrogen, similar to to me, it's similar to the LNG story when it started long time ago. People, LNG wasn't something that people would import. The hydrogen at the similar stage at this moment. The drop in technology price, the drop in renewable price will encourage more countries to come and seek importing hydrogen, because the cost will drop. I think it needs to drop further because it's still seen on the expensive side today. But 2030 horizon is what they talk about. A lot of people talk about 2030 when hydrogen will be a mainstream. So you
Yeah.
have about 9 years from now, and it takes you a couple of years to build a project. And I would say with the recent announcement, there is one of the biggest project now announced is in Oman. 25 gigawatt is a huge
Yes.
energy amount to go for hydrogen, and that is will put us in a good shape, I think.
Yeah, but doctor, isn't the case for all, like the new technology and so on? It's so expensive at the beginning. I remember back then in the nuclear industry, or let's say the renewables industry, when they started, everybody is like racing to acquire this technology and to have it while it's so expensive. So, like after that, the studies showed that the countries that didn't invested in the renewables or the nuclear in the early stage now are gaining, because the technologies become cheaper. There is more efficiency in the things that in the process or the work or the technology related. So do you think, is it like right now we can wait for 2 or 3 years, since the technology it is still in the development stage? There is like still what do you call, no many countries developing the technologies. So is it the right time to invest on this, or we can wait until it becomes cheaper and so on, and we can comfortably invest on that?
I think it's the right time because we started. There's already project in Oman. There are already people working on detailing hydrogen production facilities at the detailed design at the design stage. Technology price will drop when you have economy of scale. When, for example, when a factory in Germany or on Europe is producing electrolyzers, gets an order for 100 of them, it would be cheaper to produce. So that's what we the bigger the global momentum, the cheaper the technology would be, and I think it's moving faster than expectation. I would say we are a lot of people are waiting uh, for laws and regulation to do with the CO2.
Mhm.
For those people who are following the energy and the environmental aspect of it, there is the COP26 meeting in Glasgow by the end of this year, where
Yes.
Paris Agreement discussions will take place, and there will be a carbon market, or there's more stringent laws and drive from the international community on the CO2 emission, on the carbon. And a lot of countries have already raised the expectation by announcing bigger CO2 cuts
Mhm.
in the 2030 horizon. For example, by 2030 we'll do this, by 2050 we'll do this. So that's giving signals to the investors, signals to the technology developers that yes, go ahead and develop renewables, develop storage solutions, develop hydrogen as an option, because at the end of the day you need a mix of technologies. If you are to reduce the CO2, you cannot rely on one technology or another. They will need to have a mix to have a healthy energy system.
Yeah. So, talking about this, Doctor, what are the current challenges or concern related to this? I heard there is something related to the policy that they think it's still not like mature in this field, and there's, as you mentioned, they are working on it extensively to cover all the aspect related to it. So, what are the challenges that this industry now is facing?
Yes, I think one of the main challenges is would be onto, for example, green hydrogen pricing. I mean, commodities or oil, gas has a pricing mechanism. People know how to trade into it. Something
Mhm.
new that people they don't know what will be a fair price. Will the price drop next year or stay? What controls the price? There is
Mhm.
no trading hub, for example. LNG has a trading hub, but hydrogen doesn't. And these are there are working groups trying to build international consortiums into establishing some of these required enablers to make the hydrogen commodity that can be traded. Also on the pricing side, it's still an expensive, and there is no, for example, some countries doesn't have carbon tax. You can still live using the gray hydrogen. Why would I switch to the green hydrogen unless there is a law and requirement to decarbonize or remove your CO2? So as these decarbonization regulation develop, and if you're following the news today, we have heard that Oman LNG signed an agreement with Shell to provide the first carbon neutral LNG shipment. So there is already a momentum in that front. The world is in transition to renewables. The only uncertainty is how fast that transition will move. We know that we're going to a less emission world in terms of the energy sector. How fast will we move that direction is depending on the policy and on the international community coming together and pushing certain aspect of this international policy.
So why Dr. Oman consider as a good country, like, or a very promising country is so to grow a hydrogen and produce hydrogen compared to other countries? Why some other countries have a limitation, or it is considered
Yes.
expensive to produce hydrogen?
Yeah. If I can have my the screen on
Yes.
now, I picked this from hydrogen import collision. I think I mentioned before that uh, countries import energy. There are
Mhm.
certain parts of the world that doesn't have enough resources of energy. Now, be it fossil fuel, be it renewables, they would still need to import energy. This energy import or an export will continue. There are certain let's say consideration when you want to produce green hydrogen, for example. If countries would like to go to net zero by 2050, they would need to import green hydrogen, especially Europe. Europe cannot meet its net zero 2050 without importing clean energy or decarbonizing their system. They are importing energy anyway. They might as well import an energy that doesn't emit CO2. This is a map of the world, that a study done by the Hydrogen Import Coalition that looked at certain places in the world that enjoy higher share of renewables or high renewable energy resources, and try to measure how much will it cost to transport. Because remember, you need to produce the hydrogen, convert it into a form that is transportable, liquid or any other form, or gas if possible,
Mm-hmm.
then uh, the cost of this energy arriving to the final customer will be the cost of production and the cost of shipment. So
Sure.
Oman enjoys a very competitive location.
Mm-hmm.
And this is, for example, based on Oman. If you go through the Suez Canal, you are competitive comparing to Chile, comparing to Panama, that have high resources of renewable energies.
Yeah.
The distance to the market is important. The other aspect is this map that we adapted from the IEA Future of Hydrogen report that looks at who has the highest or renewable resources, or another way, the lowest cost per kilogram of hydrogen, because you have a lot of renewable energy. And 75% of the cost of the hydrogen production comes from the consumption of the power or the electricity you need to use to split the water. So if you have cheap electricity from renewable energy, you would have a competitive advantage also to produce cheap green hydrogen. And
Mm-hmm.
Oman is one of the top three, or the top three cheapest in the red zone, are the countries in the world that enjoy a low cost hydrogen. You mentioned Chile, that's the dark red. Oman is also light red, that is still competitive. However, if we compare ourselves with Chile has a higher cost of transportation. Then the net would be not very much difference between a country that has very high renewable resources and a country that have, high renewable resources, if you can get a good transportation route and infrastructure. The other aspect, hydrogen is a gas, and we have a very well developed gas production, transportation, and export network in Oman.
Mm-hmm.
So we could potentially just capitalize on the same network, on the same experience to produce hydrogen, ship it, and the experience. You also have the market, people who import the energy today. We are an energy traders will also import the hydrogen energy. So you also have that link and that established connection with the market, the energy market. So this gives us a good competitive advantage to enter into something like a hydrogen as a new energy market.
Great, great to
I
hear
hope
that.
that clarify the competitive advantage of Oman. We are
Yeah.
very well positioned, and we
Yeah.
have an infrastructure in place. We have a good renewable resources, and we are a nation who always did energy trading and energy production. Comparing us to countries like Chile, who doesn't do natural gas,
Yeah.
for example, now, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, Doctor, are we doing enough in the just infrastructure? You are building the project, looking to the market, and so on. Aren't we need to do some work as well on the local expertise to develop the human capital here related to this industry and so on? Because there is not much people identified as an expert in this field. There is no much fresh graduated as well in this field and so on. So can you tell us more about that part, and what are the efforts going on in this field?
I think when it comes to the hydrogen as an industry, it will fit within the renewables within the energy sector. And I
Mhm.
think we have a lot of science and engineering graduates. I think we're doing very well in terms of the number of science and engineering. Our energy industry employs a lot of people. And that is what you could capitalize. You would need, to me, there's no much upskilling required for somebody who works in the natural gas field to work on a pipeline that transport hydrogen. Okay, the safety measures may be different, a lot of small differences, but again, you have an energy professions, and those
Mhm.
energy professions could also become a renewable energy or sustainable energy professionals.
So,
Uh, the
yeah.
awareness, I think one thing is having that mentality and awareness when you conduct your normal job, that okay, there's a sustainability element to things, and embedding that sustainability, or thinking about CO2 emission in the project that we do will be one thing we could immediately do in the contracts that we sign, into the financial dealing that we do in our young professionals who work in finance, young
Mhm.
professionals who work in projects. Having that awareness about there is a CO2 impact, there is a CO2 footprint, will also help bridge the gap between a traditional energy and sustainable energy world. So um, the other item, I think the multidisciplinary teams. Now the energy industry is moving away from an electrical engineer or a mechanical engineer. now the things like hydrogen will combine process chemical engineering, mechanical, and maybe electrical. So that mindset of having multidisciplinary team working together and collaboration is also an important thing for the young professionals or the young generation to pick up on. So, ability to learn new skills and new trades, I think, on new technologies. It's interesting that the IEA report for that advocates that by 2050 the world should be net zero CO2 emission, stated also the majority of this CO2 reduction will come from a technology that doesn't exist today. So the prediction is, even if we want to remove all the CO2 emission from our energy industry, we don't have the technology. This has to happen from a new invention, a new technology. So
Okay.
the ability to think outside the box, the ability to invent and reinvent, I think will be an important skill. We don't need a new academic skill, I would say. The
Mhm.
physics still the physics, the
Yeah.
engineering still engineering, but that mindset and ability to solve problems will be very critical for going forward.
Yeah, so no special diploma need to be introduced into our academic organization and so on. Whatever we have right now can fit nicely in this hydrogen industry, and it require a small upscaling of the current people or current capabilities that they are working in the oil and gas industry, let's say, or the renewables industry, which is still virgin in our country, right?
That's true, true. At the end of the day,
Hmm.
if you talk about green hydrogen, it is renewable energy coupled with electrolyzer, which is an electricity, electrical engineering and process engineering would be able to deal with such process. If you talk about blue hydrogen, the process engineering and CO2 capture is something that we have been doing in the oil and gas industry for years now. So the skill set is there. Adapting the skill set to a new project or to a new development is not that difficult. I think the biggest question is how do we enter the market in the right place, and would the hydrogen cost drop with the support of certain sort of technology developers that are committed to develop the technology and make it cheaper to produce the hydrogen. The current cost is around $3, I would say, per kilogram, and the
Hmm.
gray hydrogen in our region would cost about $1. So that is about two times, to three times more. But the
This is the production
expectation,
cost. This is the
yeah,
production cost, and
yeah, for the gray hydrogen which we use today is around $1, and that in that
mhm,
area. But for the green, it's still around $3, plus
mhm.
minus. So there is a gap. If we are to remove the CO2, and then we need to close that gap by either developing the technology and cheaper production, or some governments or some funds that will fund the gap between the gray hydrogen and the green hydrogen, or a CO2 taxation that will come in the world that
Yeah.
will be used to fund these technologies.
Okay. But you mentioned something that it's the value, or sorry, or the price of the hydrogen. It is quite expensive right now, right?
The green one is more expensive than the gray. Yeah, that's why we have a lot of gray hydrogen in the industry, very
Mhm.
little green. We have some blue hydrogen because, for example, we have ammonia
Yeah.
manufacturing or ammonia plant that use the CO2 from the ammonia manufacturing into a urea production. So the CO2 doesn't escape in the atmosphere, but we also have a small amount of that. Again, because it's a new technology, the cost is not there, but it's a strategic technology. So the future would be transiting into clean energy, and when that will happen, how fast will countries adopt the green hydrogen is the question of time only, and we have to be very sort of position ourselves to be ready
Yeah.
when the business is needed.
Yeah. So the forecasting for the production price, it will be expected to decrease, right, as we develop newer technologies and
Yes,
more efficient and so on. How
yes,
about the
and
price?
yeah,
Yeah. How about
and
the
it's
price of the
20,
market?
yeah. 2030 is always talked about the horizon. So within the 2030 horizon, these such technology like hydrogen would be in the business. That expectation has been changing. It was 2040 to then 2030. I think the technology is fast developing that even becomes sooner than 2030. So
Great,
what was
great.
the other question?
The price of it, is it forecasted to be, decreasing or increasing, for the market price of the hydrogen? Is
I
it
think
forecasted?
yeah, it's forecasted to decrease for the green hydrogen for sure
Mm,
decrease. And I said this is similar to the LNG when it started. There was no market.
yeah.
The hydrogen has no interest. Then it picked the market. Then the price is attractive.
Mhm.
Solar cells, for example, 10 years ago, it was too expensive to put a solar cell, and the price was dropping because there is a technology development. So technology starts expensive, but I think as there is more market, the technology will always drop. So the price is expected to drop, I would say, until it comes similar to the gray hydrogen. Then from there, I think the green hydrogen will be attractive. How fast will this the price dropping? That's a question that nobody can answer.
But the need of it, or the need of it, it will be growing, right? That there will be a market need for it in the next
Yes.
coming. Yeah.
Yes, and if I can share a slide on the expectation from again the IEA report, if you can have the screens up. This is, for example, what the IEA recent decarbonization report expect as a hydrogen demand. So you can see in the 2020, it is the purple sector. That is what I discussed earlier is the hard to decarbonize sectors. That is the refineries, iron and steel, chemicals that needs a lot of heat. So they are
Mhm.
expected to lead the need or the market demand will be in those sectors. Then slowly the other sectors will pick up. So 2025 you still see that purple section is demanding, and you start getting the blending in gas grid as a dark green will pick up from 2025. This is to cover. This is due to an energy security. There are countries who don't have enough gas, and the idea, if you don't have enough gas and you have a gas line and you have a gas grid connected to your industry, to your refinery, to homes in some places, why don't you make the gas? So the 2025 is expected to see a lot of momentum into countries producing hydrogen and injecting it into the natural gas grid. So you have a hydrogen natural gas mix replacing the shortage of the gas.
Yeah.
And then as you move, other sectors will adapt. As you expected from 2030, expectation hydrogen will become a mainstream, and then it will have higher share from the low carbon, and the other sectors will actually join the road or the hydrogen trucks and trains. There are already hydrogen trains, for example, now,
Yeah.
because we all know the renewables are or the the cars that run on batteries are very attractive. However, when you talk about large transportation sectors, trains, trucks, you really need very big heavy batteries to run trains, and so then
Mhm.
hydrogen becomes attractive because the energy, the weight for the same energy, you can have a smaller weight and becomes attractive for large transportation sector.
Mhm. Thanks a lot, Doctor. It's been interesting information, but we need to now open the doors for questions. So to start with, from 3A Al-Adawi, Doctor, there is a question. There is a lot of need for liquid CO2 in the current oil and gas industry. There is a lot of need for liquid CO2 in the current oil and gas industry. The question is popping down there.
Okay. Yeah. I think the oil and gas industry will need CO2 in what is known as CO2 EUR. Currently, there is, I would say, identified need, but there is no current use. So if we are, I think he's linking this to if we are to do blue hydrogen, we need to remove the CO2 from the hydrogen and find a way to kind of safely store that CO2 or use that CO2 without emitting it. Currently, there is no existing use, but I think there is a potential. If our oil production would continue, we are not stopping oil production. We'll continue to produce oil production, and we could use CO2 and a CO2 EUR on enhanced oil recovery using CO2. And to my knowledge, there are candidates in Oman that can benefit, or candidate reservoirs in oil and gas that can benefit from a CO2 EUR. The economics of it, the project viability is something that has to be detailed on a case by case basis.
There is, I think, an ongoing project on that, the CO storage, right? Where the reservoir has been studied right now to be a potential candidate for storage for the CO2, either in
Yes, I
PDO, I think
think
next as
yes.
well.
Yes, I think there is a there's one aspect to do with the CO2 mineralization. That is the Oman is has a natural peridotite formations. Those are rocks that has ability to convert CO2 into mineral. And there was huge project called Oman Drill in the past that tried to international project to identify the capacity or the characterization of these peridotite. And then from there, I think there is an already in the media a news about small experimentation into can you sequestrate or can you safely convert that CO2 into minerals underground. How much will it cost? Is it viable? It's still in the experimentation stage.
Hmm. So another question, Doctor, is from named by Salin V Power. Someone I think is really interested in the power industry or in the energy industry. So, does the feasibility studies for those projects considered the sustainability of the business? Yeah, very important questions.
Yeah, I think it has to, because you cannot run non-sustainable business, and the feasibility of the project would have to look into the life cycle CO2 emission. So
Mhm.
when you, it is very becoming a very normal practice now that project look into their life cycle CO2 emission. If I do this project, how much CO2 will I emit? And that becomes part of what the shareholder or the interested parties taking their decision on. And yes, indeed, feasibility of project would look into the sustainability from all aspects, including the CO2, the water consumption as well. It is being looked with at this project feasibility.
Okay. So another question from Freaky Fritter. When is the national study on the hydrogen expected to be completed? What needs to be done on policy?
Right. So I think the expectation is by the end of this year that feasibility study of the national hydrogen feasibility study should conclude. Uh, what is needed to be done on policy? I think there's quite a number of items that need to be done in the policy. I think the majority of this already in the making. We have recently also heard MEM through His Excellency Salam
Some.
Al Aufi mentioning that the power sector will have the bilaterals, the agreement. So somebody producing energy, green energy, for example, could sell it to somebody who needs a green energy. It doesn't have to be through the system that existing currently that relies on single company buys and sells electricity. So that's an enabler for trading power in the country between producer or industrial user. I think the other item that we are looking forward to is the power energy spot market or power electricity power spot market, where anybody having excess power would be able to offer it for somebody who is looking for power, and then we bank on that to enable more people, more development in the renewables. So to go into the hydrogen business, you would need really to have a sizable renewable development if you go to the green hydrogen, and anything that enables the renewable or the green power development, solar cells, wind in Oman, whether it is policy, land allocation, trading of green energy, are actually the pillars or the basis for promoting hydrogen business.
Mm. So basically, the feasibility study is really promising, I would say.
I think it's between the time we started and now. I think we were thinking about you do a feasibility, then people will pick on projects. But what we have seen while we're doing the feasibility, companies
Already.
already starting project and initiating project. So this is to me, I would say, a promising momentum. We expected that people would wait until feasibility finish to announce project, but I think that the overall momentum in the world is fast. So there are projects while we're doing the feasibility project being announced in Oman.
Yeah. So, Doctor, there another question from Murshid, just popping up. Could you talk about Oman's CO2 emission policy and what will you expect new policies would force our? Maybe there's a mission question.
Not
Force
about the
our, yeah,
emission. Yeah,
yeah,
I think
force our companies to invest more in the blue and green energy. Yeah, the policy
yes.
is always a concern about this.
Yeah, I think Oman is a signatory to the Paris Climate Agreement. It has been ratified, and we have a commitment to reduce our emission by 2% from a baseline, and that is an international commitment that Oman is going to meet. And normally we submit what is called nationally determined contribution, and since we are in that agreement, I think there would be a need to reduce our CO2 emission. And there is already a commitment, and that commitment would have to be updated in the future. So the energy business would have to adapt to a global demand for reducing CO2. And since we have signed the Paris Agreement, I think we are committed as a country to meet that and meet any further obligation.
Okay, great. So my question to you, Doctor, I know be a real and honest answer for that. We are doing all this efforts, the governmental, the private sector, the individuals, but there is always an error, or sorry, a room for improvement and so on. So what we are not doing, what we should do more right now, and what are the gaps that we need to fill, like what we are still not doing here in Oman when it's come to talk about the hydrogen industry.
I think what we need to do more of, let's put it this way, we're doing quite a lot. What we need to do more of is, I think, promote Oman as the right to be, as an attractive place for renewables. We already hoping to see the start of one of the largest scale renewable production stations in Oman. That's the Abri 500 megawatt power. There is a lot of opportunities. We have far more renewable resources than what we need currently, even in the next tens of years. The only way is to exploit these renewables, bring in an investment to Oman, and tell the world, yes, we do have the infrastructure, we have the human capital, we have the expertise. I think the Omani engineers and the reputation that we have here for our people, for our professionals in the region, I think is not matched. So those are the elements that we need to sell ourselves more on. We have the capabilities, we have the experience, infrastructure, and the resources, just maybe to attract more investment and try how can we think on a collective manner, whether it is government, companies, academia, and universities, have that collective thought and collective dialogue. How can we together help Oman realize the maximum benefit from the renewable resources, whether it is hydrogen or anything else?
Yeah, totally agree with you that everything depends on the successful and the great marketing of it. So I think we have one final questions before we close this one. I think from Celine V Power again. The success of such project depend strongly on effective stakeholder engagement. Can we know who are they? The stakeholders you mentioned about OQ, right? And there's a couple of
countries. In the media, I mean, if you follow the media in Oman about hydrogen, all the news releases, OQ has been in the news talking about hydrogen for a lot. I think it's the energy companies in Oman are the main stakeholders. We have MEM, because it's the energy of mineral and energy of Ministry of Energy and Minerals. They are the policy makers here in Oman for energy, and those are the natural energy stakeholders, are the same stakeholders for the hydrogen, I would say. Yeah.